The fighter pilot comes home after 5 years to find his wife in an entanglement and his daughter a stranger to him. The flight was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't belong to silence but to exhaustion. Captain Ryan Caldwell sat in the cramped airline seat, his back too stiff for the reclining lever to matter, eyes fixed on the oval window beside him. The horizon was breaking into gold and blue, the early light spilling across the Atlantic like melted brass. He had spent the better part of 5 years chasing sunsets and sunrises from the cockpit of a fighter jet. But this one felt unreal. He was coming home. The commercial plane banked left, giving him a sliver of coastline. The familiar hook of the bay, the ribbon of sand, the inlet where fishing boats used to rock on gentle tides. He could almost smell the salt from here, almost hear the low bark of the sea lions on the pier. But the glass kept it all at a distance, like a photograph taped to a wall he couldn't touch. He rubbed his thumb over the web of veins on his right hand, tracing the faint ridges of scar tissue across his knuckles. The skin there was pale and tight, a gift from the last year of deployment. Carrier deck accident. Jet blast caught him off guard, slammed him into a safety barrier hard enough to rearrange the bones in his hand. They'd patched him up quick, but it never felt the same after. Still, he could fly. That's what mattered. The captain's voice over the intercom brought him back. Cabin crew, prepare for landing. Ryan shifted, the seatbelt biting into his hip as the plane descended through low, cottony clouds. His duffel bag was under the seat, bulging with everything he owned that hadn't been shipped back by the Navy. It felt ridiculous. 5 years of life compressed into military-issue fabric and a set of uniforms that no longer smelled like him, only like starch and sea air. The wheels hit tarmac with a muted thump. A shiver of anticipation ran through him. He imagined stepping into the terminal, scanning the crowd, spotting Claire's face. Maybe Sophie's too. She'd be what now, 13? Last time he saw her she'd been 8, still missing her 2 front teeth, calling him Daddy Fly, because of his job. The seatbelt sign pinged off. Passengers rose, pulling bags from overhead bins. Ryan stayed put, letting them file past. He didn't like the crush of people, the elbows and bags bumping him. Too much movement. He'd grown used to controlled spaces, procedures, predictability. A carrier deck might roar and scream with jet noise, but there were rules there. The civilian chaos of airports felt foreign. When he finally stepped into the terminal, it hit him all at once. The smell of coffee and floor cleaner, the sound of rolling luggage, and 100 different conversations overlapping. Somewhere, a baby cried in sharp bursts. Ryan's eyes scanned instinctively for a familiar face. No one. Not Claire. Not Sophie. No handwritten sign with welcome home in big bubble letters. His stomach gave a slow, sinking turn. He told himself maybe they were stuck in traffic. Maybe Claire had planned a surprise at the house. He adjusted the duffel strap over his shoulder and kept walking, the glass doors parting automatically to let him into the sunlight. Outside, the air was heavy with salt and the faint tang of gasoline from the pickup lane. The taxi line stretched down the curb. He considered calling a rideshare, but the thought of small talk with a stranger made him grit his teeth. Instead, he waved over one of the yellow cabs idling farther down. The driver was a wiry man in his 60s, cigarette tucked behind his ear. "Where to?" he asked, sliding Ryan's duffel into the trunk. "Seaview Drive," Ryan said. "Number 26. The man nodded, merging into traffic without another word. Ryan leaned his head against the window, watching the streets roll past. This was his town, but not quite. New storefronts had popped up. A smoothie bar where the old hardware store had been, a boutique replacing the discount shoe outlet. Even the marina looked different. The boats were sleeker, the paint fresher. When the cab finally turned onto Seaview Drive, Ryan's pulse quickened. The houses here were set back behind neat lawns, The kind of place where kids rode bikes in the street until dinner. Number 26 was halfway down, a white clapboard two-story with blue shutters. He'd painted those shutters himself before deployment, standing on a ladder while Claire handed him fresh brushes. The cab slowed. Ryan reached for his wallet. Then he froze. The driveway was full. 2 cars he didn't recognize, and in the backyard people. A lot of them. The gate was open, balloons swaying in the breeze. There was a long table set with food, and a banner strung between the posts of the back porch. He couldn't make out the words from here. He paid the driver quickly, shouldered his bag, and walked slowly toward the sidewalk hedge. His boots were silent on the grass. From the gap in the hedge, the banner came into view. On it read, "Congratulations Claire and Ethan." Ryan stared. His heartbeat felt like it had shifted into his throat. Claire stood in the center of the yard, wearing a pale yellow dress that moved with the wind. Sophie was beside her, taller than he remembered, her hair in a loose braid. Between them stood a man in a crisp button-down shirt, one hand resting on Claire's back. Ryan didn't need to be told who Ethan was. The man had the easy, relaxed smile of someone who belonged here. Claire laughed at something he said. Sophie laughed too. The sound hit Ryan like turbulence he couldn't recover from. He backed away from the hedge, his boots crunching on gravel. No one had seen him. The sunlight felt too bright, the air too thin. 5 years. 5 years of sand, salt, and steel decks under his feet. 5 years thinking of this place as the end point, the light at the end of the runway. And now, he turned, duffel heavy on his shoulder, and started walking back toward the main road. The sound of the party faded behind him. Ryan walked without thinking about where his boots were taking him. The duffel strap dug into his shoulder, the weight familiar but now entirely out of place. He had carried packs heavier than this through blistering desert heat, and over metal gangways slick with sea spray. He had trudged through monsoon rains that turned the air into soup. But this walk away from his own home, was the heaviest he'd felt in years. He stopped at the corner, the air salted and faintly sweet with the smell of someone's grill heating up. The laughter from the backyard was muffled by distance now, but it still reached him in short, jagged bursts when the breeze shifted. He turned his head back once. Just once. From here, the party was just shapes and color. Yellow dress, white balloons, the glint of sunlight off glassware. It could have been any family celebrating any milestone. Except it wasn't any family. It was his. He turned away again and kept walking. The main road was busier than he remembered, the sound of tires on asphalt mixing with the call of gulls overhead. He found himself drifting toward the pier without deciding to. His hands slid into the pockets of his jacket, fingers brushing the edge of a folded piece of paper. It was the letter Claire had sent him 9 months ago, the last real communication they'd had. He'd read it 100 times on the ship, the paper growing softer with every fold. She'd written about Sophie's school play, about how the water heater had finally given out, about how she hoped he was safe. There had been no "I miss you," no "I can't wait for you to come home." He'd told himself it was because she didn't want to get too emotional while he was still deployed. He'd told himself a lot of things. At the pier, the boards under his boots groaned like they remembered him. The air was different here, thicker with salt, tinged with the oily scent of bait from the fishing station. Boats bobbed lazily against their moorings, lines creaking. He stood at the edge, watching the water slap against the pilings. He'd called this view home once. He used to bring Sophie here on Sunday mornings when Claire wanted to sleep in. They'd buy a bag of day-old bread from the corner store and feed the gulls until the birds grew bold enough to snatch crusts from Sophie's fingers. She'd squeal and hide behind his legs, then peek out to see if they'd come back. Ryan felt the memory press against him, bittersweet and hollow. He set the duffel down at his feet. His phone was in his pocket, battery at 68%. He pulled it out, thumb hovering over Claire's name in his contacts. His finger almost tapped it, almost, before he locked the screen again. What was he going to say? "Hi, I'm back. I saw the party. Who's Ethan?" No, not like that. Farther down the pier, two old fishermen sat in camp chairs, lines cast out. One of them glanced over, gave a nod that Ryan returned out of reflex. It was the kind of wordless acknowledgement men here traded when they didn't need or want conversation. The sun was higher now, painting the water in hard, white shards. Ryan squinted and thought about the ship. The constant noise, the smell of jet fuel, the tight corridors where you could hear the person in the next berth breathing. It was miserable in 100 ways, but at least it made sense. Out there, you had a job, orders. You knew your place in the machine. Here, everything felt like static. By noon, his stomach reminded him he hadn't eaten since the airline breakfast. A lukewarm croissant and a small plastic cup of fruit. He picked up the duffel and headed toward the driftwood, the only diner that had survived from his childhood. Inside, the place smelled exactly the same. Coffee, grease, and the faint tang of lemon cleaner. The vinyl booths were still patched with duct tape in the corners. He slid into one near the window, duffel on the floor beside him. A waitress in her 40s approached, pen ready. Her name tag said Mara. "What can I get you, hon?" "Coffee, black, and the burger special." Coming right up. When she left, Ryan leaned back and looked out at the street. Life went on outside. People walking dogs, kids with ice cream cones, a guy unloading boxes from a delivery truck. It was like watching a movie where the sound was turned down. The burger was greasy and perfect. The coffee was bitter in the way he liked. Still, halfway through the meal, he caught himself staring at the door, expecting someone familiar to walk in. Claire, Sophie. Instead, a man about his age came in wearing a crisp polo, sunglasses perched on his head. He had the look of someone who knew he was welcome wherever he went. Ryan's gut told him it was Ethan before the waitress even greeted him like an old friend. He turned his face toward the window, tension knotting his shoulders. He could hear Ethan's voice at the counter. Warm, easy. The sound of it scraped at something raw inside Ryan. He paid in cash, left the change on the table, and slipped out before Ethan could see him. He ended up walking aimlessly through streets that were both familiar and foreign. Every turn held a memory, but the details had shifted. The old movie theater was now a yoga studio. The corner store where Sophie once bought candy after school had been turned into a boutique selling candles that probably cost more than his boots. Eventually, his feet carried him to the small public park near the school. The playground was nearly empty except for a boy on the swings, his mother pushing gently while talking into her phone. Ryan sat on a bench under the shade of an elm tree. He remembered Sophie here at 7 years old, running up the slide instead of down, laughing so hard she could barely breathe. Claire had been on the bench beside him then, hair pulled back, eyes crinkled in the sun. A wind picked up, rustling the leaves. Ryan closed his eyes. That was when the first flashback hit him, sudden and vivid. It wasn't to a memory of home, but to the day he left. Claire had driven him to the base in silence. Sophie sat in the back seat with a stuffed dolphin clutched to her chest, the one he'd won for her at the boardwalk fair. When they'd pulled up to the security gate, Sophie's eyes had brimmed with tears. Claire had kissed him on the cheek, quick and almost businesslike, then turned to look straight ahead. He'd told himself it was because goodbyes were harder if you dragged them out. He'd believed it. Ryan opened his eyes again, the flashback fading. The boy on the swings was gone. The park was quiet. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from an unfamiliar number. "Hi, Ryan. It's Claire." He stared at it for a long time before opening it. "I heard you were back in town. Can we talk?" Ryan read the text again. It didn't say I missed you. It didn't say I'm sorry. Just can we talk? He typed, deleted, typed again. His thumbs hovered over the screen. Finally he wrote, "Where?" The reply came quicker than he expected. "The pier. By the old bait shack. 3 p.m. Ryan checked the time. Just past 1. That gave him 2 hours to kill, and 1,000 different emotions to try and contain. Then came the time. 3 p.m. The sun was still high, but the light had softened, turning the water a deeper shade of blue. The pier was quieter now. The fishermen had packed up, and the only sound was the distant rumble of a boat engine. Claire was already there, leaning against the weathered railing, hair tied back, sunglasses hiding her eyes. She wasn't wearing the bright yellow dress from earlier, just jeans and a pale sweater. When she turned at the sound of his boots on the boards, Ryan saw that her face had changed. Not drastically. The same sharp cheekbones, the same shape of her mouth. But there was a kind of guardedness there that hadn't existed before. "Ryan," she said. "Claire." For a moment, they just stood there, the space between them crowded with things unsaid. Claire had rehearsed this meeting in her head all morning, but now every practiced line had evaporated. She could still see the look on his face from earlier, when he'd seen her on the lawn. The moment she realized he had come home without telling her. He looked tired, but not the kind of tired she remembered from before. This was deeper, a weariness in the way he stood, the way his eyes kept scanning their surroundings. She told herself to start with something neutral. "I didn't know you were back." "Yeah," he said. "Just got in." She swallowed. "You could have told me." "I could have," he said. His voice was even, but she could feel the weight behind it. Ryan didn't want this to turn into a fight right away, but the way she said "you could have told me" made something in him flare. He thought of the balloons, the laughing stranger, the way Sophie had looked so comfortable with Ethan's hand on her shoulder. "I didn't want to interrupt," he said finally. Claire's mouth tightened. "That wasn't," she stopped herself. "It was just a barbecue." "With who?" "Friends," she said, but her gaze slid away for a fraction of a second. Now let's rewind to Claire. 9 months ago. The first time she met Ethan was at the hardware store. She'd been trying to figure out which water heater she could afford on her own. He'd been behind her in line and had offered advice, the kind that actually sounded useful instead of condescending. She hadn't thought much of it until a few weeks later, when Sophie's school fundraiser brought him to their table. They talked easily, laughed even. It wasn't planned. Nothing had been planned. But as months passed and Ryan's calls became shorter and less frequent, Ethan's presence had started to feel like stability. Now to the present day. Ryan's jaw flexed, but he didn't push it. Not yet. Instead, he asked, "How's Sophie?" "She's good," Claire said. A faint smile touched her lips. "You'll see her." "When?" Claire hesitated. "Maybe tonight, if you want." Sophie that afternoon was lying on her bed, legs kicked up behind her, scrolling through pictures on her phone. Most were from the barbecue earlier. Her and Mom, her and Uncle Ethan. She liked calling him that. It made things feel simple, even if she didn't know exactly what he was to them. When Mom walked in, Sophie set the phone down. "Hey kiddo," Mom said. "Guess who's in town?" Sophie blinked. "Who?" "Your dad." The word felt strange. She hadn't seen him in over a year. "Is he staying here?" "Not tonight," Mom said gently. "But soon." Later in Ryan's motel room. Ryan dropped his duffel by the bed. The room smelled faintly of bleach and something older, something permanent. He sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at the blank wall. There was a knock at the door. He opened it to find Sophie standing there, hands stuffed in her hoodie pocket. Claire was a few steps behind. "Hey kiddo," Ryan said. Sophie looked at him for a moment, then stepped forward and hugged him. It wasn't tight, but it was real. "For dinner," They ate at a small Italian place Sophie liked. Conversation was mostly about her, school projects, friends, the swim team. Ryan listened, asked questions, laughed where appropriate. Claire watched him carefully, as if measuring every reaction. When Sophie went to the restroom, Ryan said quietly, "We need to talk about earlier." Claire's fork paused mid-air. "Not here." Outside the restaurant, they stepped out into the cool evening air. Streetlights flickered on, casting pale circles on the sidewalk. Claire turned to him. "Tomorrow. We'll talk tomorrow." And Ryan, he waited. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." She walked away before he could answer. Claire walked away toward the parking lot, the sound of her footsteps swallowed by the evening hum of the town. Ryan stayed where he was, hands shoved into his jacket pockets, watching until she turned a corner and vanished. It was the same walk she used to make toward him years ago, light, certain, with that sway of her shoulders that told him she knew exactly where she was headed. Now, her gait was quicker, tighter, as if she were already late for somewhere else. When she got back home, Ethan was in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher. He glanced up at her. "How'd it go?" Claire hung her keys on the hook and shrugged, keeping her tone light. "It was fine." Ethan studied her for a beat, as if searching for a crack in the answer. "He's staying. Probably at the motel," she said. She moved past him to the fridge, pulled out a bottle of white wine. "Claire!" His voice was low, cautious. She turned, the bottle still in her hand. "What?" "You need to tell him. Sooner or later." Her throat tightened. "I will. When? When it's the right time." Ethan didn't push further, but his silence was heavy. Claire poured herself a glass and stared at the pale swirl inside, telling herself she still had control of this. Now Ryan was back at the motel. The motel room was too quiet. He could hear the hum of the vending machine outside, the occasional whoosh of a passing car. Lying on his back, he stared at the ceiling fan spinning in slow, uneven circles. Every creak of the building, every flicker of light made his body tense like it used to during deployments. He closed his eyes and let the memories come. A flashback to deployment, year 3. Night over the desert, the cockpit glowing with muted reds and greens. His hands on the stick, sweat under his helmet, even though the air was cold at that altitude. His wingman's voice crackled through the comms. "Target lock confirmed. You good up there?" Ryan had answered automatically. "I'm good." But he wasn't good. He hadn't been for a long time. Each mission blurred into the next. Each return to base another reminder of how far away home was. One night, after a particularly long sortie, he'd sat alone in his quarters staring at a picture of Claire and Sophie. Sophie had been 8 when he left. He'd tried to imagine her at 10, 11, 12. The harder he tried, the more the image slipped away. He spawned back into his present reality. He sat up, rubbing his hands over his face. The silence pressed in again, heavier now. He reached for his phone, thumb hovering over Claire's number. He didn't call. Instead, he scrolled through old photos until his eyes blurred. In her room, Sophie sat cross-legged on the bed, phone in hand. Her best friend Jenna had just sent. "So what's he like?" Sophie typed, erased, typed again. Finally she wrote, "He's nice. Different than I remember." Different how? She thought about his smile at dinner, the way his eyes seemed to watch her like he was memorizing every detail. Older. Tired. She hesitated, then added, "I don't know him anymore." Claire had agreed to talk at the cafe near the pier. It was the kind of place they'd gone to when they were first dating. Chipped mugs, strong coffee, the smell of cinnamon rolls in the air. Ryan was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table with his hands wrapped around a mug. She slid into the seat opposite him. "You look like you didn't sleep." "I didn't," he said. "Too quiet." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Ryan leaned forward. "Claire, I need to know. Are you with him? Her eyes flickered. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Yes, you do. His voice was steady, but there was steel under it. Claire looked down at her coffee. Ryan, you were gone for 5 years. And life didn't stop here. Sophie needed stability. I needed. She broke off. I didn't plan for it to happen. Ryan's jaw worked, but he didn't speak. The sound of the espresso machine hissed in the background, filling the space between them. Finally, Claire said, "There's more I have to tell you, but not here. Not yet." What does that mean? It means you deserve the truth, she said, standing. But it's complicated. She left without finishing her coffee. Ryan sat there long after she was gone, staring at the steam curling from his mug until it disappeared. That night, from his motel balcony, Ryan watched the distant light from the harbor blinking against the dark. Somewhere out there was the life he'd left behind, familiar in shape, foreign in detail. And beneath all of it, the gnawing certainty that when Claire finally told him whatever she was holding back, it would change everything. The next morning, Ryan woke to the sound of gulls and the low groan of a fishing boat engine drifting through the thin motel curtains. His body clock was still locked to somewhere halfway across the Pacific. Early dawn patrol, checklists in the dark, briefing rooms smelling faintly of coffee and hydraulic fluid. Here, in his own hometown, the air felt heavier, sweeter, and strangely hostile. The room was small enough that when he swung his legs off the bed, his knees brushed the edge of the desk. His duffel sat in the corner, still zipped, as if part of him refused to unpack in case he had to take off again. He sat there for a long minute, head in his hands, trying to reconcile the image of Claire laughing in her backyard with a man whose hand rested at the small of her back, with the image that had kept him alive during quiet moments on deployment. Claire in that same backyard, but waiting for him. The night before had been a reconnaissance mission of sorts. He'd stayed in the shadows, observing. No one had seen him, except maybe Sophie, or maybe she hadn't recognized him at all. She'd grown.
Taller.
Her hair a little darker, her smile no longer the open-mouthed, reckless thing of a child, but something quieter, more guarded. She'd worn a light blue dress that fluttered in the sea breeze as she handed out drinks to the guests. Every movement of hers was foreign and familiar at the same time. He brewed the motel's single packet of stale coffee in the tiny drip machine, drank it black, and stood at the window for a long while, staring down at the parking lot. A kid in a hoodie skated lazily in loops between the faded white lines. Somewhere across town, Claire was waking up next to Ethan. The thought landed like turbulence in his chest. That afternoon, Ryan walked the main street. The air smelled of fried fish, old wood, and salt water. Some storefronts were the same. Duffy's Hardware, where he used to buy fishing tackle with his dad. The diner with the same chipped neon open sign. But the movie theater had been replaced by some kind of artisan bakery, and there was a yoga studio where the old bike shop used to be. People looked at him strangely, not unfriendly, just searching, as though his face triggered a memory they couldn't place. An older man with a white beard finally stopped him. "Ryan Caldwell?" Ryan nodded slowly. "I'll be damned," the man said, smiling. "We heard. Well, we didn't hear much. Just that you weren't coming back. Welcome home." The man didn't ask questions about where Ryan had been, or why he hadn't called. The small talk was brief, polite, and tinged with the sort of awkward distance people reserve for those who'd been gone too long. That evening, he sat at the Marina bar nursing a beer. The windows looked out over the water, the surface shifting in copper and gold under the dying light. He could see the tops of the masts swaying against the horizon. He didn't notice her until she was standing right beside him. "Ryan?" Claire's voice. He turned slowly. She was dressed in jeans and a white sweater, hair tied loosely back. She looked exactly as she had the night before, and nothing like she had in the years he'd kept her face in his head. "I heard you were back," she said, sliding onto the stool next to him. He nodded. I came by yesterday. Her eyes flickered. I know. Neither spoke for a long moment. The bartender came by, and she ordered a club soda. I didn't know how to tell you, she said finally. You didn't, Ryan replied. You just moved on. Her fingers tightened around the glass. You were gone 5 years, Ryan. No calls. No letters after the first year. The Navy said you were. They said they didn't know if you were alive. Sophie cried herself to sleep for months. She broke off. And then Ethan. He was just there for us. He never tried to replace you. But he stayed. The silence was heavy. I'm not asking you to explain, Ryan said. I just wanted to see her. Claire looked at him for a long time, then nodded. She's not the same little girl you left. She's careful now. I'm careful too, he said quietly. Claire hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small piece of paper. A phone number. Call her. Meet her. But don't expect her to just. She trailed off. You know. He slipped the paper into his pocket. When Claire left, Ryan sat there until the bar emptied. Outside, the night smelled like wet rope and diesel. The next day, he called Sophie. Her voice was higher than he remembered, but steady. Hi, it's Dad. There was a pause. Claire said you might call. Yeah, I was wondering if you wanted to meet up. Another pause, this one longer. Maybe. Not today. Okay. He waited, but she didn't say anything else. Whenever you're ready. A week passed. Ryan filled the time with long walks, aimless drives, and the occasional trip to the airfield, where he stood behind the chain-link fence watching Cessnas take off. The smell of jet fuel still made his chest ache. One afternoon, as he was leaving the pier, he saw her, Sophie, walking with Ethan. They were carrying grocery bags, talking easily. She spotted him before Ethan did, froze for half a heartbeat, then kept walking. Ethan glanced at Ryan, his face unreadable, then looked forward again. That night, Sophie texted him. Tomorrow, 4 p.m. The pier. When Ryan got there, she was already sitting on the bench at the end, legs swinging over the water. She didn't look at him as he sat beside her. You're taller, he said. You're older, she replied. They sat in silence for a long time, the water slapping gently against the pilings. Finally, she asked, Why didn't you come back sooner? He tried to answer. About missions, classified orders, the ocean feeling endless. But the words came out clumsy. I thought I was doing something important. And then it was too late. Sophie stared out at the horizon. Ethan was there, she said finally. He's not trying to be you. But he is my dad now. Ryan swallowed. I'm not asking to take that away. I just want to know you. She glanced at him, and for the first time there was no anger in her eyes. Maybe we can start with coffee sometime. But before he could answer, a shadow moved at the edge of the pier. Ethan, hands in his pockets, watching them. He approached slowly, nodding once at Ryan. Guess we should finally meet, Ethan said. Ryan stood, shook his hand. The grip was firm, steady. Whatever this is, Ethan said quietly, let's not make it harder for her. Ryan nodded. That's the last thing I want. Ethan studied him for a long moment, then looked at Sophie. Ready to go? She hesitated. I'll text you, she said to Ryan, and then they were gone. That night, as Ryan sat in his motel room staring at the phone, it buzzed with a new message from Claire. There's more I need to tell you. Meet me tomorrow. Alone. Claire picked the cafe, a small, out-of-the-way place tucked behind the marina, with mismatched chairs and the smell of fresh bread. Ryan arrived early and sat where he could see the door. The light came in slantwise through the windows, hitting the dust motes in the air like floating embers. She came in 15 minutes late, sunglasses still on, hair a little windblown. She didn't order anything, just slid into the seat across from him. "There's something you need to hear before you get too comfortable here," she said. Ryan leaned back, studying her. "Go on." She glanced at the other tables. Only two older men nursing coffees, one woman with a laptop, and lowered her voice. "Sophie wasn't supposed to know this. But you do." He waited. "When you went missing, they told me your aircraft went down in bad weather, somewhere off the grid. But then, about 2 months later, I got a visit. Not from the Navy. I don't even know what they were. 2 men, black SUV, no insignia. They said they had information about you, but they also said I couldn't tell anyone." Ryan frowned. "What kind of information?" "They said you'd been recovered." Her voice was flat now, like she'd rehearsed the words. "Not by them, by someone else. And that you weren't safe to bring home yet. That there were things you'd seen, things you knew, that could put us in danger." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Danger from who?" "They didn't say. Just that I had to carry on as if you weren't coming back. And they left me a number to call in case anyone unusual started asking questions." The cafe seemed to shrink around them. "And?" he asked. "I called it once," she said. A man answered. "Told me never to call again unless it was life or death." And Ryan, a week after that, there was a break-in. Nothing stolen, nothing broken, just things moved. Sophie's school photo taken out of a frame and left on the kitchen counter. Ryan stared at her, the sound of gulls outside suddenly distant. "You never told me any of this. They said if I did, it could bring them back. Whoever they are." She leaned in, eyes sharp now. "So when you showed up in town last week, alive and acting like none of this happened, do you understand why I might be on edge?" He sat back, feeling the faint hum of adrenaline he used to get before a storm front. "Claire, I need that number. The one they gave you." She hesitated. "You think I kept it?" "You did," he said quietly. "You don't throw away something like that, even if you hate yourself for keeping it." She didn't deny it. Instead, she reached into her bag, pulled out a folded scrap of paper, and slid it across the table. "I'm only giving you this because I think maybe you're not done with whatever happened out there." Ryan tucked it into his wallet. "I'll handle it." "Ryan?" Her voice stopped him as he stood. "Be careful. Whoever they were, they weren't bluffing." That night, he sat on the edge of the motel bed, phone in hand, staring at the number. It had no area code, just a string of digits that felt wrong somehow. Too short, too deliberate. He dialed. The line clicked immediately. A voice spoke. "You took your time." Ryan froze. "Who is this?" "You know who I am," the voice replied. "And you know why you shouldn't be here. I'm not leaving until I get answers. Answers are dangerous. For you. For the girl. For everyone." The line went dead. The next morning, he walked the pier again, trying to think. That's when he saw Sophie, alone this time, leaning on the railing. She turned when she heard his footsteps. "I talked to Ethan," she said. "About you." He said you're not telling me everything." Ryan's pulse jumped. "What did he say?" "That you were gone because of something you did, and that if you told me the truth, you'd have to take me away from here." Ryan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Sophie, that's not true. I would never." But she was already shaking her head. "I don't know who to believe." Before he could answer, a man in a baseball cap walked past them, phone to his ear. He glanced at Ryan for just a fraction too long. Recognition flickered, and then he kept walking. Ryan felt the hairs rise on his arms. That night he didn't sleep. Every sound outside the motel made him tense. Somewhere between 2 and 3 in the morning, a car rolled slowly through the parking lot, headlights off. He watched from the dark window as it paused near his room, then drove away. When dawn broke, there was an envelope slid under his door. No name. Inside, a single Polaroid of Sophie walking home from school. On the back, in block letters, stop. The motel room was still cold from the night air when Ryan sat back on the bed, Polaroid in hand. Sophie's face was caught mid-step, hair lifting in the breeze, her school bag hanging from one shoulder. Whoever had taken it had been close enough to make her real in the frame, not just a figure in the distance. He turned the photo over again. Stop! The letters were heavy, pressed deep enough into the paper that they indented. It wasn't just a message. It was a mark, a signature of intent. Ryan laid the Polaroid flat on the table and stared at the beige wall until the light outside shifted from blue to pale gold. His mind kept pulling back to the man on the pier the day before. The way his gaze had lingered for just that fraction too long. By mid-morning, Ryan had made a decision. Ethan was working at the boatyard when Ryan found him. He stood near a half-stripped hull, wiping his hands on a rag, his back straightening when he saw Ryan approaching. "Morning," Ethan said cautiously, as if they were neighbors and not two men bound by an unspoken war. Ryan didn't waste time. "We need to talk. Privately." Ethan glanced around, nodded, and led him into a small maintenance shed that smelled of oil and damp wood. Ryan pulled the Polaroid from his jacket and held it up. "Someone left this at my door last night." Ethan's face didn't change much, but his grip on the rag tightened. "And you're telling me because you're the only person here who's had eyes on my family for the past 5 years. If someone's circling them, I need to know what you know." Ethan's gaze was steady. "Ryan, you think I'm your enemy. I'm not. But I'm also not your friend. Not in this. Then what are you?" There was a pause, and then Ethan sighed. "You were never supposed to come back." The words were simple, but they hit Ryan like sudden turbulence. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I'm saying there were arrangements. When you went down, there was a gap someone needed to fill. For Sophie, for Claire, for the house, the bills, everything. That doesn't explain this." Ryan jabbed the Polaroid toward him. "No, it doesn't," Ethan admitted. "But it explains why you being here makes people nervous. Because you being alive means the people who made those arrangements have to start asking questions. And when they ask questions, they don't stop." Ryan's voice was low now. "Who are they?" Ethan shook his head. "I'm not sure. I just know they're not the kind of people you can threaten. And they're not above sending reminders." "Reminders like this?" Ethan didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. That night, Ryan drove out past the harbor, past the empty stretch of highway where the sound of the sea was swallowed by wind. He stopped where the road narrowed into dirt and shut off the engine. He sat in the dark for a long time, weighing the same two truths: that he had a right to be in Sophie's life, and that staying might be the very thing that put her in danger. The phone number in his wallet felt heavier than the wallet itself. He took it out, dialed again. Same click, same voice. "You were warned." Ryan kept his tone even. "I'll go. But you leave them alone. Forever." A pause. Then, "We were never interested in them. Only you." The line went dead. He didn't sleep that night. In the morning, he walked to Claire's house. Sophie answered the door, still in pajamas, blinking against the sun. "You're leaving," she said. Not a question. Ryan crouched so they were eye level. "For now. But that doesn't mean I'm gone. It just means I'm making sure you're safe." Her eyes glistened. "I don't want to forget you again." "You won't," he promised. "Because I'm not going to let you." She hugged him then, fiercely, as if she already knew it was the last time in a long while. Weeks later, Ryan stood on the deck of a small trawler bound for another coast. He'd taken a job where the sea was always in sight, but far enough that no one from the old life would cross his path. In the evenings, he'd write letters he didn't send, descriptions of the smell of salt in the air, the way gulls cut across the horizon, the feeling of wind on his face after a long day. He imagined Sophie reading them someday, piecing together the truth from the edges of his words. Life had moved on without him. That was the reality. But here, with the water stretching endlessly ahead, he began to see that moving on didn't have to mean letting go. Some homecomings weren't about returning. They were about finding a place you could belong to again, even if it wasn't the one you'd left behind. And as the boat cut through the waves, Ryan let the old world slip further behind, until it was just a shadow on the horizon.